one is often tempted when talking about diamonds to say things like diamonds are a girl's best friend, but I'm afraid in the Zimbabwean context, it's very much a story of blood diamonds. And so what I'm going to do is expand on those few remarks which Alan made about the context in Zimbabwe. I think our panel is timely today as events in Zimbabwe seem close to a turning point, with an escalation of violence, which has been a periodic experience in the last 10, 15 years in Zim, but the past few weeks have been particularly intense, with militants associated with ZANU-PF throwing stones, beating and hospitalizing people whenever the leading party, the MDC, attempted to hold rallies in Hatcliffe, Matabeleland North, Lupani, Victoria Falls, and then in Harare and in Chitangwiza. They've invaded Parliament. A gang, Chipengano, believed to be affiliated with ZANU-PF, has enforced its control violently in the Mbari area. And the ZRP, the ZANU police, or the Zimbabwean police, pardon me, seized upon vendors who were fleeing them and they fled into Harvest House, which was the headquarters of the MDC, and were tear gassed. So the atmosphere has been very, very turbulent. And I think this escalation of violence in the last little while, which even the South Africans are talking about, reflects the tension, anxiety, and above all, the uncertainty of this moment. And I think if there's one word which really reflects the mood as I read it from here, and remember I'm reading it long distance, is uncertainty. With Robert Mugabe's health visibly deteriorating, in the last week having trouble getting up and down stairs, not being strong enough to participate fully in graduation ceremonies at universities, photographed sleeping through public ceremonies, and of course, we're all keeping track of his now 9 visits to the Far East for, it is widely believed, medical treatment, although stoutly denied by official sources. From WikiLeaks, we're told that Mugabe's prostate cancer has metastasized and that he has at most only a few years, if that, to live. At 87, he is an old man, and so, and as his wife Grace is reported to have said, and we heard from WikiLeaks a number of years ago, he's out of it 75% of the time. So it's the end of the road, not only for Mugabe, but for an era in Zimbabwe. And hence, many associated with the regime, and after all, it's been going on now for 31 years, are anxious about how to navigate the change, which all know is coming. This is a really, as I say, a turning point, a kind of fulcrum. And that's really the motivating factor for why powerful forces in Zimbabwe are anxious to have an election. Tomorrow would be good, yesterday would have been better, because they still want to run with Mugabe as their candidate. Partly because it's reported there would be fractures in the party without him. In this plan, I wrote it first fantasy, ZANU-PF will resume running Zimbabwe, replacing the current coalition government formed under the GPA of February 2009, which shares power with the MDC. The desire then that's motivating the violence, which is behind the uncertainty, is to resume full control of the Zimbabwean government. One wonders how realistic this desire is, but it continues to be pressed on the parties to the global political agreement. So far, the regional organization SADC and South Africa, who's meant to be the chief actor for SADC in the Zimbabwean situation, has rebuffed this suggestion until the new constitution is promulgated and rules are in place so that an election can be free and fair. The region does not want a repeat of the violence that happened in 2008, particularly in the second leg of the presidential election. A lot is at stake, and I think Alan opened this up by pointing out that the revenues now from diamonds, he mentioned $2 billion annually. I've seen figures as high as $4 billion. I mean, none of us really know because there's no accurate reporting. But according to Eddie Cross, only 174 million of this 2 to 4 billion which are being produced every year has gone into the Zimbabwean government exchequer in the past 5 years. The rest we can only assume goes to others working in the mining fields, the companies, the various actors, which are certainly related to ZANU-PF. Preparations then for elections are already underway. For the last few years, we've been reading reports that militias and military in rural areas for quite some time have been established, provoking worries that ZANU-PF is preparing the ground for a repeat of the June 2008 elections. Then, of course, this past recent escalation of violence in the urban areas. One has the sense that hardline forces within ZANU-PF who want snap elections have been struggling with two contradictory thoughts. One is that they can go it alone now with diamond wealth. And two, the realization that SADC and most of the international community would not accept a repeat of the June 2008 no-holds-barred election. So they're struggling with these competing thoughts. So the news out of Zimbabwe is quite schizophrenic. One minute you have Mugabe making a pronouncement in favor of peace and against violence, while on the ground violence continues and is intensifying. And I would say that the incoherence within Zimbabwe is a reflection of four factors. One, it's of a state being ruled by a ramshackle coalition of two major parties, and then the tiny MDC splinter. Two, there are profound splits within ZANU-PF itself as they contemplate the end of the Mugabe era. Three, and this is a speculation, so just keep it in mind as a possibility, the probability that there already has been a quasi-coup of a sorts, whereby Zimbabwe is being run by something known as the JOC, the Joint Operations Command, combining hardline ZANU-PFers with Emerson Mnangagwa, Patrick Chinamasa, and Jonathan Moyo, and others directing strategy, while the generals, Chilenga, Shiri, and then of course Chihuri of the police, Simoni of prisons, constitute an alternative key center of power. So you've got a coalition splits within ZANU-PF, then you have the JOC as a kind of nexus of power. And then the fourth factor that I'd say was behind the incoherence is the visceral fear and anxiety that the MDC and Morgan Tsvangirai's popularity will decimate ZANU-PF at the polls in any election that is remotely free and fair, despite the fact that of all that the ZANU-PF has done and is doing to crush it. And also despite the fact that many feel that the MDC itself has been compromised by, with scandals large and small, from the indecent haste to take advantage of luxury cars and the perks that go with office, while civil service salaries remain very token. And then, of course, the scandal attending the construction of new house for Morgan Tsvangirai, where he's accused of double dipping. We don't know the full goods on that story. So the themes of violence, uncertainty, fear, anxiety, and incoherence, which I've been exploring, are prologue. They set the stage for tonight's speakers. Zimbabwe is at a critical moment in its political life, and powerful forces have a lot to lose. Until the realization of the significant size of diamond reserves in eastern Zimbabwe in the mid-2000s, and as Alan said, called the largest in a generation, some have said the greatest in a century, but clearly major. The prospects until that point for the for the regime had looked grim. Because just tracing back and reminding you of some of the history, and I won't go into this too long, so don't worry, I'm not going on a long digression. But at the end of the 1990s, after a period of deteriorating living standards and standard repression, a powerful opposition emerged, which for the first time in Zimbabwe looked like it could take on what was then the ruling political party, ZANU-PF.